So women and metabolism. We are going to today talk about, what is metabolism, getting older. That's, aging is a very, very influential factor in metabolic change for women. Hormonal changes, changes in female hormones also impact metabolism. And these hormone changes all happen just throughout the women's life cycle. So different parts of a woman's life will impact their hormones, hormone levels, which all have an impact on metabolism as well. And then some healthy habits that just adopt health. What are some healthy habits that we can adopt to support metabolism long term? And I always like to finish off with some recipes. So what is metabolism? So it refers to the chemical reaction that occurs in the body to convert food into energy. So when we eat food, that's all the food that we're eating. And that's why we really want to kind of have, a relatively healthy diet, because everything that we're eating is really being converted into energy. It's being used for something. And so, we want to make smart choices so that we get the best use out of that food. And this energy is measured in units called calories, right? So when we talk about calories, it's really that energy conversion. So then we have the basal metabolic rate, so the BMR. BMR is the rate at which our bodies burn energy. Our bodies burn calories in different ways, including, so there's resting metabolic rate, which is exactly as it sounds when we're resting. There's food digestion. So when our food digests, it's burning energy. And then obviously physical activity is probably going to burn energy the quickest. There's female versus male metabolism. So biological sex impacts metabolic rate. The two biological sexes are female and male. Compared to males, females have a slower metabolic rate. And remember that biological sex is different from gender, right? We're talking about the sex in which you were born. So females do have a slower metabolic rate. A lot of women talk about that, how they feel that way. And it actually is true to some degree. Sometimes people will say, oh, well, sometimes men, may have it easier with their bodies. It's easier to lose weight. I don't want to say that's, 100% true, but there is some truth to that just because their natural metabolic rate is a little bit faster. So there are several factors that contribute to the slower metabolic rates of females. So muscle mass. So naturally, muscle mass is higher in men, and muscle mass burns more energy at rest. So when we have higher muscle mass, when we are in that resting metabolic rate, there just is generally more energy being burned. Also, body size. Women tend to have smaller body sizes than men, so they just require less energy. And testosterone, this is a predominantly male hormone that increases metabolism. So men have more, they have higher levels of this hormone, so that increases metabolism. So now we're going to get into getting older and metabolism. And so why is it that aging is such an influential factor in metabolic changes, especially for women? So lean body mass decreases. So women naturally lose lean body mass or muscle as they get older. Men do too, but women have already less to begin with, as we learned before. So having less muscle mass decreases your metabolic rate. So this just is something that happens, things that we can do, which we'll talk about a little later when we talk about, trying to, conserve our metabolism, physical activity, eating lean proteins, things like that, which I'm going to get into a little bit more in later in this presentation. These are all things that we can do to make sure that we, keep a healthy metabolism, lose less muscle mass. So body and lifestyle changes. So children have higher metabolic rates because they undergo several periods of rapid growth. During puberty is one example of this. So adults are done growing and often adopt sedentary lifestyles like an office job, right? So think about whether yourself as a kid or, if you have kids or, just kids, in your family, they're typically just more active generally, right? And, hopefully, I don't know what's going on now, but in schools, PE is like mandatory, right? A lot of them do sports after school, or they're, they go to the park and they're running around, and they just generally, I know from my own kids, like they wake up like Energizer bunnies. Like they have so much energy and they're always running around and they're always able to run, which is great. That's what we want, right? We want our kids to have so much energy. They're also growing so much, and this just allows for their metabolisms to just be really, really fast, right? So sometimes, if you think of yourself as a kid, right? And you would be like, oh, I used to be able to eat anything and, it wouldn't do anything. It wouldn't cause any weight changes or anything. And that's because when we're younger, our metabolism is generally a little bit faster. And of course, there's, this is not 100% for every single kid, but just for the most part, children do tend to have a higher metabolic rate. Puberty is a time when this kind of starts to a little bit slow down. And then, when you get to become an adult, you're not growing anymore. So, you're not going through those rapid periods of growth. And often adults just don't have as much time to be running around like our kids are, right? Like, my kids started camp and they're like running around all day and they come home exhausted. And for me, I can get a workout in, a 45 to 1 minute to 1 hour workout in, a day or a few days a week. But then I'm sitting by a computer and I'm doing work. I'm not being active all day long. So that's just generally lifestyle changes, do this as well. Hormonal changes and metabolism. So hormonal changes impact women's metabolism through the life cycle. So the menstrual cycle is one that's, very important. The hormonal changes that accompany the menstrual cycle influence metabolism as well as appetite, mood, which, we generally say, PMS, right? But it's true. It's actually real. These hormonal changes really do impact mood and energy levels, right? Some people may remember or have someone going through, still getting their menstrual cycles, that, energy levels may fall. And this also has to do with hormonal changes. In fact, a woman's metabolic rate is higher or lower depending on the phase of her cycle. So there's different phases of the menstrual cycle, and the metabolic rate can change during this, which is why some people, when they're trying to, conceive or get pregnant, they will actually, go based off of their metabolic rate. And they'll kind of be able to test their metabolic rate. There's like different apps and different bracelets that you wear that kind of track different hormone levels and your metabolic rate. And that kind of can help determine when is the best time in your cycle to conceive. So pregnancy. So for those who become pregnant, gaining excess weight can impact metabolism long-term. So changes in sleeping pattern that increase hunger hormones are very common as well. So just generally, too much weight gain during pregnancy can have more long-term effect. Doctors will give like the recommended amount of weight gain. And sometimes there's a little bit of leeway on both ends, but sometimes if it's like really way more than what the recommendations are, it can, after having the baby and everything like that, it definitely can change metabolism long-term. Menopause. So menopause is a really, really big one, probably the biggest one. So menopause, it changes our weight distribution. So it's common to hold weight in the stomach area, which is a risk factor for metabolic diseases, right? They call it metabolic syndrome. And the change in estrogen levels during menopause has a big impact on metabolism. So that's really where all that starts. Before menopause, so pre-menopause, women's weight distribution is kind of a little bit more all over. And then during menopause, it's more common for the weight to kind of shift towards the stomach area. Also increases these risk factors for some of these metabolic diseases. So that's an important thing to know. So the thyroid is an endocrine gland that has a significant impact on metabolism. So hyperthyroidism, when our hormones very, very active, and people tend to lose weight very, very quickly, but like really without trying and in dangerous levels. It's not something we want. It's not like, oh, great, I have hyperthyroidism and now I'm losing weight left and right. It's actually something that's, very dangerous and something that we need to make sure we have under control with medication. And then there's hypothyroidism. They'll find it very, very difficult to lose weight, and they'll try and they'll eat really well and they'll be very physically active. And there's just nothing that they can do to allow them to lose weight. And that's when their thyroid kind of slows down. Women are more likely to develop a thyroid disorder compared to men, especially after pregnancy and menopause. So it is really, really important, after pregnancy, right after menopause, or continuously after menopause, to get our thyroid levels checked to make sure that we didn't develop any of these hypo or hyperthyroidism or Hashimoto's or anything of that sort, because this really, really can affect our metabolism, and ultimately it can affect other organs in our body. But the first thing that's usually seen, one of the first signs that's usually seen from a thyroid disorder, is this change in metabolism. If you do notice a change in metabolism, you notice a change and, you're gaining excess weight or you're losing excess weight and not really trying. It's more without the trying. Obviously, if you're trying, that could be the reason. But if you notice and that you're not really doing much to try and you haven't had your thyroid checked in a while, I would definitely get your thyroid checked because it's a very, very important thing to make sure that we're checking. And the levels can change in a month. Like we can get our thyroid tested 1 month and a month later, it can really change. So it's definitely important to make sure that we're managing our thyroid if we do develop any of these disorders. So hypo is lower levels of thyroid hormone that decreases metabolism. So I said include weight gain, low energy, dry skin, like everything's just kind of dry. And hyper is the higher levels of thyroid hormones increase metabolism. So rapid weight loss, irregular heartbeat, hand tremors, kind of like just feeling very, very jittery, almost like you've had like gallons and gallons of caffeine plus the weight loss. Those are usually like the symptoms. So polycystic ovarian syndrome, otherwise known as PCOS. So this is a hormonal and autoimmune disorder that has lifelong impacts on metabolism. So some people will kind of know or hear that they have PCOS. A lot of women find out earlier in life. Some women find out when they're trying to get pregnant, and it's been very difficult. They become diagnosed with PCOS. And some women only get diagnosed later in life with PCOS when they're entering like menopause. So they're more likely to be overweight or obese. They're insulin resistant, which is really like the key here, I think, as to why it may be more difficult to lose weight and things like that. And they have high blood pressure. And these are all examples of metabolic effects. So PCOS is definitely something that causes our hormones to become very, very sensitive. And insulin resistance is like the biggest key here. So a lot of women who do have PCOS will be told to take certain diabetes medications like metformin, for example, is a very, very common diabetes medication that women with PCOS of all ages will be told to maybe take because they're hoping that it will reduce that insulin resistance a bit and can help with, both weight loss or women trying to get pregnant or, in menopause as well, different changes that happen. So it's pretty common for a doctor to recommend those medications. So now we're getting to healthy habits for metabolic health. So what are things that we can do? Again, there's so many things that we don't have control over. And hormones are definitely one of those things in our body that we don't really have so much control over. There are definitely things that we can do to promote and support our metabolism long term. So the media often refers to specific diets, foods, and supplements that boost metabolism. I think that's like one of those like flashing light words, and people are like, "Oh, great, boosting metabolism! It's gonna make it faster. I'm gonna lose weight." Some of these claims can hold some truth, but definitely don't waste your money on products that promise drastic changes overnight. And I don't mean literally overnight. I mean like in a week you can lose 50 pounds. That is A, not healthy, B, probably not true. And if it is true, it is probably incredibly unhealthy for us. So definitely don't waste your money on that. But you can increase your metabolic rate by adopting realistic and healthy habits like eating a nutrient-dense diet. But it's really just about making sure that the foods that we're eating have, healthy nutrients and contain nutrients rather than, just having processed foods and fried foods that have like really little to no nutrition value. Getting enough sleep. Sleep is super, super important for our hormones. I know it gets harder in different phases of our life, and especially as we get older, and it gets much harder to sleep. We really, really want to try to get 8 hours a night. And it doesn't have to be continuous, right? Sometimes we wake up, we have to go to the bathroom. We do want to make sure we're drinking enough water. So we don't want to tell people, don't drink water so you don't wake up to go to the bathroom. That's fine. But we want to make sure that we're trying then to, get ourselves back to sleep and things of that sort, and exercising regularly. Physical activity is going to be, I would say, probably the number one. I would say probably all of these are really, really, really important, but exercising regularly is going to be one of the most important parts of making our metabolic rate a little bit healthier and speeding that up a bit. Exercise regularly. Physical activity that builds muscle, like strength training, can increase metabolic rate. This is because muscle burns more calories than fat, even at rest. Women, especially after menopause, really want to focus on strength training. And I'm not saying we need to become muscle builders. That's not what we're going for. But doing cardio is great. It's so great. We want to do that. But we need to add in more exercise, more physical activity that's also going to strength train and build muscle. Because what happens is we said, right, when we lose muscle mass and muscle wasting, which happens very, very often as we get older, as we become a little bit more sedentary, that allows for weight gain as well and does not promote any sort of increase in our metabolic rate. And I'm not saying you have to go and, fit and bench press and everything like that, but we want to get even to keep some, a set of 2-pound weights at home and in your chair, just like do, a few reps of different kind of weight building exercises. This is going to be super, super important to increase our metabolic rate, going to be super important to prevent muscle wasting. And it also just will make you feel good. It'll make you feel good to keep that muscle, to continue to build that muscle. And it's just very, very important. So as I mentioned, cardio is also very, very important. I'm not going to say it's not, but strength training and building muscle, especially, post menopause is going to be super, super important in keeping that metabolic rate at a good rate. Stand when you can. So you may have a sedentary lifestyle. If you listen, some people, they just can't, right? The standing desks have become so popular. And I'm not saying everybody can do them, but if you can, even for a few minutes, take some time to stand up to do work. If you're not working, just, instead of sitting on the couch all day, take a few minutes, just stand up, kind of walk around your house. Obviously, if you can, it's going to be very important. Taking short breaks from sitting by standing and just walking around also can have a lot of benefit, over health and metabolism. So ditch dieting. So eating too few calories can actually slow down your metabolism. And I tell this to people all the time, and they're always, people think like, oh, less calories, so that's it. But actually, when we don't eat enough, we tend to actually hold on to, because we need that energy. So it actually slows down our metabolism. And that's because your body, like I said, is trying to preserve energy. So we want to make sure we're having a proper caloric deficit, which means the calories leaving our body needed to lose weight without damaging your metabolism. So we want to make sure that, with the calories that we're getting in, we're making sure that we're losing, kind of similar amounts to we're taking in, but we don't want to lose too much, because that's actually going to slow down our metabolism, because our body's going to be like, wait, I need that energy. Like, where are you going? And so they're going to slow down a bit. And that's actually going to end up being more detrimental. Prioritize protein. So there's 3 macronutrients. So there's proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. All are important. Eating enough protein will help prevent muscle loss. So as I mentioned before, with physical activity and strength training and, preserving muscle mass, also eating, good sources of protein will also help, prevent this muscle loss. So we want to make sure we're getting lean protein, right? So here you see some salmon, right? Fish, poultry, a lean beef. These are all really, really good options. Seafood, all really good options. Obviously, plant-based proteins as well, really helpful in preventing muscle loss. So drink water is also going to be very, very important, because what happens is when we're drinking enough water, what our body does is it tries to regulate the cold water coming in to body temperature, and that helps to burn energy as well. So it's really going to be important that we make sure we're drinking enough water. It doesn't have to be cold water. Even room temperature water is going to be colder than our body temperature. And what our body's trying to do is to bring that to body temperature. And that's going to also help to burn energy and to increase our metabolic rate. Lack of sleep decreases the number of calories you burn daily. So this is due to dysregulated blood sugar that interferes with hunger hormones. So everything we do is so interconnected to our hormones, and our hormones are so important in terms of our metabolism and our metabolic rate. And I'm sure you're seeing this pattern as we're going through this presentation, just how important it actually is to make sure that we're doing all of these activities appropriately, so that we don't lose muscle mass and we continue to increase our metabolic rate. Recipes for women's metabolism. So here we have a quinoa chickpea salad. So, there's a whole bunch of ingredients. So quinoa, chickpeas, bell pepper, cucumbers, tomatoes, carrots. But what are the health highlights? That's really the important part here. So the protein from the quinoa and the chickpeas, they'll help stabilize blood sugar levels, sustain energy and support muscle growth, right? As I mentioned, quinoa. Quinoa is actually a complete protein, so that's a really great protein option. Chickpeas also have great protein in them, both good plant-based, nutrient-dense proteins. Fiber from other vegetables and chickpeas promote bowel health and keep us fuller for longer. And the monounsaturated fats from olive oil support brain health and heart health, which is just always a good benefit, right? Because we always talk about eating nutrient-dense meals.
Is getting your thyroid checked part of like normal blood tests? It's a general checkup, or is it something you need to ask for?
No, yes, TSH is usually checked. It's not in like a complete blood count. CBC is usually the complete blood count is usually like our white blood cells, red blood cells, iron, things like that.
Yeah.
But if you are going for a checkup like once a year, then TSH is usually checked. Yes.